Thank you. It's good to be welcomed back like that. You know, you never know. When you're visiting and you're pre-scheduled twice, you never know after the first time if anybody wants you back. Like, damn, we got this guy again. Well, you welcome back my wife. That's generally how it works. People want enjoy her around. But it is good to be here. I hope you had an amazing week. Spring finally came. And it came in April this year, which is a win, right? So it has been a beautiful weekend. Last night I was in bed. We're just sitting there kind of wrapping up a bit what was an incredibly busy day. And I just was zoning out. And when I zone out, I'm like, I'm going to watch something really that has no intrinsic value to my life, right? So sometimes for me, it's like History Channel shows. Right? Other times it's, she actually caught me watching a documentary on professional wrestling last night that I quickly turned off. But what I did after that is I picked up my phone and I start going through the NFL draft. Any football fans here? A couple? Okay, so I don't watch the draft. It's like 4 days long. Who has that time? But I did go to Instagram. I go to the Seahawks Instagram, and I'm going through things. And I'll tell you, this is when I become like a softie. I go and I watch the videos of the players who get drafted at the end of the draft, not the beginning of the draft. The beginning of the draft, all of those guys know they're getting picked. It's just a matter of where you get picked, right? But the ones at the end don't know if they're getting picked. And I'm watching this video that they shared of this young man who got drafted in the 7th round, which is the final round. He was one of the last 10 people picked. And they make the call. He picks up the phone. John Schneider, the general manager of the Seahawks, introduces himself, and this young man just starts weeping on the phone, just crying. And you can't see his face, but you can tell he can't even pull it together. And I'm visualizing, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know his name, but I imagine he just got drafted to be a professional football player. He is a superior world-class athlete who has performed his entire life at the highest level. And yet he didn't know if he was actually quite good enough to get chosen. It's always moving to me. This is when I get teary. So she's sitting there, I'm showing Kelly, and I don't know if she really cares that much, but we're in bed next to each other. I feel like we should share this moment, because to me it's really powerful. She's watching it on my phone, and I'm leaning back because I'd already seen it. And I'm tearing up. But I don't want her to see me tearing up, because she doesn't really see me cry much. I'm not a big crier. But that type of thing gets me. This idea of somebody actually being chosen to live out their lifelong dream. They put in the work, and then somebody says, we want you on our team. Not everybody gets that, and I haven't always had that in my life, where you feel like you're wanted and you get picked. Years ago, I used to work in a few different universities in a variety of different roles, and I remember this was during the 2008, you remember those days, that 2008, 9, 10, the economy was a little problematic, right? And I was looking for a job. I remember I finished my master's degree in seminary. I was typing my final paper when the stock market crashed. I took a break for my paper. I turned on the news for a minute, and I see the stock market just falling apart. And they're like, people are going to the banks to withdraw all their money. And I'm like, this can't be good for my prospects, as I'm supposed to graduate in a week. But I go through this process, and I apply to this university for this position, and they interview me, and I don't hear anything for weeks. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not getting this one. And then 3-4 weeks later, I get a call. And they ask me if I'm still interested in the position. And I'm like, yes, I've applied to 200 jobs in the last month and don't get a call back. Yes, I don't care what it is. So I get to work the next week. I start, and nobody's really talking to me. I'm just there. They give me all this stuff to read, to learn, by myself all day, 8 hours a day, just by myself sitting there. The end of the week, I take a break. There's this man in the office. He'd been there for a while, and we walk down the road and we get coffee. And as we're walking, he goes, yeah, we actually offered the position to somebody else first. I'm like, wonderful. And then we offered it to somebody else after that. And that person said it didn't pay enough, so they were going to stay where they were. And I'm like, Awesome. Thank you for boosting my confidence that I am the person you want for this job. I'm so thrilled to be here. I feel your embrace right now. And that actually set the tone for the time I worked there. That's why I didn't stay very long, let's be honest. There's something about being picked, though, for the team, right? Even when you were a kid, at recess, when you line up and you're picking who's on the kickball team or the basketball team at recess, nobody wants to be picked last. Everybody wants to be picked first. Everybody wants to be chosen, right? I always cringe. We'll watch Survivor with the kids. When there was no sports on TV a few years ago, Survivor was the closest thing. So we watched like 15-year-old, seasons of Survivor. And they have that moment where they pick, and they like have to choose, and then there's the one person left out and can't compete and has to watch. I always get this thing inside of me. I'm like, oh, that would be awful, so painful to watch. We all want to be chosen. Chosen by others, chosen for the team, for the job, chosen for life, chosen by God. There's a passage I want to read today in Luke chapter 5. If you have a Bible, you can turn with it there. We're going to begin in verse 1. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. They saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that the nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled the boat. They filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. So you picture this moment, this scene where Jesus is here. He's early on in his ministry. He doesn't have disciples yet. He's there in this early morning, and he's speaking to these crowds. And as he speaks, the crowds continue to gather around him. Now, the setting of this is on this hillside against the lake. And as he's there, the crowds get closer and closer, so much so that as he continues, the crowds grow, he actually vacates it. And he's going, "I'm going to get out in the water. I'm being pushed by this crowd so far, I'm stepping back into the lake." Which is a really interesting move, because if you've ever been on still waters, your noise becomes amplified, right? If it's a quiet setting, your voice will actually carry, which makes sense because the crowds gather, the people in the back, they don't have one of these headset mics on, right? That I break sometimes. They're back onto the water, and he continues to speak and to teach and to preach, and everybody can hear him as he goes. But this is an interesting time because he has a crowd there, but no team. The crowd is listening, but at this moment, Jesus is still in ministry alone. There's 2 audiences here. And I think we have to separate the 2. There's 2 groups of people in this setting. You have the crowds, and then you have the fishermen. They happen to be in the same place, but they're not there for the same reason. See, the crowd gathered to hear Jesus, to listen, perhaps to learn. The fishermen were there because they just finished their night's work. They're finishing everything they did. They're grimy and sweaty and dirty. They're cleaning up everything after a night of work, of labor, but with no success. See, they're crashing into each other in this moment, but they're there for very different reasons. You would think that if Jesus set out to ultimately find his people, to build a team, to raise up these men who would ultimately follow him, the crowds would be the place he would choose them from. The crowds voluntarily showed up to listen. The fishermen just happened to be there. Now put yourself in the position of the fishermen. We have any fishermen here? You better have some fishermen here. You got too much water around you not to fish. I grew up fishing. I still fish, not as much as I'd like to sometimes. Well, I fish, catching sometimes, fishing often. I grew up like in an outdoors type of family, hunting, fishing, everything. I like fishing more than hunting, just my own preference. And I still go sometimes. Last summer, I was out of Westport. My family would go out down to Westport. We go out salmon fishing when the salmon season opens up. And I'm out there with my dad. We do the thing. We're up super early. We go out, and we hit them. We get our limit, like, really quick, right? And I have a good friend named Emerson. Emerson pastors a church in Mexico City. We served together in Los Angeles for a long time, and he loves fishing. We talk about fishing whenever we're around one another. And he's like a crazy man. He goes to like Bolivia. His dad's from Bolivia. He goes to the Amazon and he fishes, and he tells me these stories of these fish he catches. So I'm like, I caught this nice Chinook. I got like an 18-pounder that day. But, this wasn't like 1985 Chinook, but it's a solid like 2022 Chinook. The people who fish know what I'm talking about, right? So I take a picture. We get back to shore, and I send Emerson the picture. Within 2 minutes, I get a picture back from him with like a 400-pound marlin that he caught the day before. And I'm like, just let me have a moment here. All right? Show off. There's something about that, though. But this is that's sport fishing. That's for fun. And maybe to eat something that night on the grill. See, what the fishermen here are doing is something very different. This is their job. This is their work. They knew how to fish. They were experts. They weren't doing this just for fun. They were doing this for survival. If they don't catch fish, they don't eat. If they don't catch fish, they don't have money to provide for all the needs they have. And if they don't catch fish when they're fishing with nets, it means there was no fish there, right? That's a difference between me trolling for salmon and not getting any versus having a net in a lake where you fish every single day of your life and you know exactly what to do. If you don't catch it, it's devastating to you in that day. And it also means there's nothing there. So there they are on the shore now, cleaning up after a hard night's work. The fishermen are watching all of this, but they're outside the crowd. And imagine being them. They just worked all night long. Grunt work, hard blue-collar work. And the crowds who had the luxury of coming up and walking and listening to Jesus are there. See, there's a difference between the two and who they were and the life that they lived. They were out breaking their backs. The crowds could sit on the hillside and hang out. You can just imagine how they felt. They're doing grunt work while the others get to casually just listen. And I don't know about you, but I felt that way at times in my life, being left out, overlooked, not being invited because of all kinds of things. You have to work. I can't afford it. I'm not on the inside of the group. Whatever the reason is, they're not on the inside of the crowds. They definitely don't look the part. Years ago, so y'all are getting to know me a little bit. So I played baseball for a really long time, like into college, and then after college, Kelly and I moved down to California, and I just missed being out on the field, and I used a connection through ministry to get onto a coaching staff at a little college in LA, and I did that for a year. It was super fun, but when we got there, it was a whole new coaching staff. We inherited a team that was terrible. Like awful. Like the year before we got there, they were 6-34. 6 wins and 34 losses. Okay? We were no juggernaut. We were not, we had a lot of work to do. I remember getting there the first day of practice, and I show up, and, I look at the team, and I'm actually kind of impressed by what I see. I see some of these guys that look like bodybuilders. They're huge. They're like great uniform guys, They look amazing in the uniform. In baseball uniforms, you can have really tight pants, and I'm like, I'm intimidated by some of these guys because they might body slam me. But they looked the part. They're the type when you pull up on the bus, if you're going to a away game and you get off the bus, you want those guys getting off first just to look good as they walk toward the field. And then we had these other young guys, these freshmen who just come in. And they looked like high school kids still, right? They hadn't filled out, like they didn't have the biceps, their back muscles weren't bulging out. They were young, 17, 18 years old. The interesting thing is, by the end of the season, we knew who the leaders of the team were, and they were not the guys in the uniforms that filled them out. They were not the guys that filled them out. They were the young guys, the guys who had hustle, who had grit, who had work ethic. By the end of the season, those seniors, they weren't playing anymore. The freshmen were leading the way. And it was incredible to see them emerge and develop, even though they didn't look the part. And if we just looked out at the crowd on the team and we said, who are going to be our main guys? Who are the difference makers? Who are going to lead us forward and turn this around and build this program? It would have been the guys who looked right, who looked good in those uniforms. The interesting thing was that the guys who'd been there, they didn't respond to our teaching, to our coaching. They didn't want to learn. They heard it, they were there, they listened, but they never moved with it. Where the young guys did. They were hungry. They were teachable. See, these crowds, they gather around Jesus, they looked the part, right? They're the ones who showed up. They're there in front of him in the room. They're the ones who go to church every single week and then leave. They're there, they're present, they're in the room. But see, there's a difference between being in the room and saying yes to what's coming. And that's this moment, this critical moment in the scriptures. So we have to ask, though, why weren't the people in the crowds the chosen ones? When Jesus gets closer to the waters, he eventually gets onto that boat. When he finished teaching the crowds, he tells the fishermen to throw the nets back out. Throw the nets back out. If I had fished all night and not caught anything, and I knew that the fish weren't there because I had nets, and if they were there, they would have been in the nets, I think the last thing I would have wanted to do was throw my nets back out. Remember, they're cleaning up at the end of the night. You clean up, you go home. They're ready to leave. They just spent hours with nothing, yet they threw the nets out. They did it. Hunger is an incredible motivator for life. Hunger moves you to respond, to do something. And in this case, you might have hunger of, I don't have anything to eat, but there's also a hunger that's deep inside of you that must do something. Hunger actually moves you forward into action, into activity, makes you responsive and responsible. Do you long for your life to change? For a different future? Are you willing to throw your own net out one more time? Or are you done for the day? Do we have the grit to get our hands dirty again after we've washed up? See, the difference between the crowds and the chosen is not the invitation, but the response to the invitation. Amen. See, we can go, Jesus just was looking for his 12 and he hadn't found them yet, but do we think he would have just stopped at 12 if hundreds would have said, yes, I'm ready to go? See, Jesus came to choose everybody who was ready, but few actually were ready to go to action. Jesus chooses everyone, but not everyone chooses to live as if they're chosen. it's an interesting thing being a visiting speaker, pastor, because everybody I meet's been so kind and wonderful. Laughter, because you know everybody. You're like, that's not really true. Just get to know them a little longer. But here's what I know, and I know this because I can say this about every church. We are people who've been chosen by the living God. We've been chosen. But then we have the responsibility of what do we do with our chosenness? Do we rest with our being chosen, or do we do something with it? See, the crowds are there. They're hearing his message. Jesus never preached without calling people into the world. Not away from the world, but back into the world. Every single time. He teaches them, and it ends with a sending call. You are to go. The final messages he had. If you're doing it, you may have grown kids. You teach them their whole life. But when they step into adulthood fully, you have one final thing to say to them. You pick the most critical thing, the most foundational thing that will drive their life forward. And his was to go to the nations. See, we see that already because the fishermen actually respond. They do it. They show themselves as being teachable and humble enough to hear, and then willing to get back to work just to see what might happen. Maybe Jesus knows something. Maybe something can happen here. But see, if they would have said, no, I'm done, they would have not been the chosen. That's so much of our story in our life. If we're followers of Jesus, the ongoing process is living in this chosenness where we're driven to action and activity, to do something, that the work does not end, that we might be tired after a long night's work or a long year or a long life, but it always moves us forward. And so we know the ending of this story. They're first told to throw their nets back out. And they respond to this instruction with willingness to listen, to act, to learn. And that created the environment for the transformation to happen. The life transformation that Jesus actually longed for. Jesus is far less concerned about how much fish they're leaving with that day than who they will become as men. And it was their teachability, their willingness to learn and listen, to hear him and move, that actually prepared them for the life they did not know they were stepping into. And they pull up more fish than they can carry. I still coach. I coach 10-year-olds now. Sometimes easier than coaching 20-year-olds, sometimes more difficult. Last night, my son had a game yesterday, and we got home last night. And he had a great game, like one of his best games of the season. But he had one moment. That was the dad sigh there. He had one moment where he hit a ground ball, and he's running to first base, and he pulls up a little early. He slows down, and I see it. And I'm at third base, coach. He's over across the field, and I'm like, what happened? Like, you almost got out because you slowed down. I can't say all that, but in my mind, that's what I'm saying. And, I'm doing hand gestures to him. But he knows what I'm saying, okay? He feels, we have telepathy in this moment, right? And he then steals second base, and now he's like 60 feet away from me. And I'm still like, what's up? Are you hurt? Like, or did you just not hustle? So he gets to third base, and now I'm like right here, I can like put my hand on his shoulder, and I'm like, are you hurt? And he goes, well, my knee hurts. And I'm like, but are you injured? Like, if you're injured, I got to take you out. If you're hurt, you just have to suck it up, right? If you're hurt, there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. Injured is you got to come out. Hurt means tough it up, tough it out, man, And we have this little moment there. And then he goes on and he does great. He pitches, he gets a couple hits, he has an awesome game. We go home, and he's happy. He's thrilled with how the game went. And then I go to the grocery store to get stuff for dinner. And he tells Kelly that he hates having his dad as a coach. Because he says he's way harder on me than he is on the other guys. It's not untrue.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing I have to talk to him about last night. So I'm in bed, I'm laying down with him, we're talking about all this, and I'm like, I can't coach every kid the same because not every kid's in the same place, right? Like some have no teachability. They walk on and off the field, they do everything. I named one kid, I'm like, he walks everywhere. If I could get him to just jog off the field once this season, it would be a win. But I go, I know you know. I know you know. So my expectation looks different. See, there's something about teachability that's critical here. Can you actually receive the input of somebody who might know more than you? Are you actually willing and open to learn, or are you done learning? And with Levi, I know he's not done. He just wants to learn from somebody other than dad sometimes. And the fight I have is about when am I dad and when am I coach, and the lines get blurry sometimes, right? But in life, teachability is critical if we want to grow, if we want to be transformed, if we actually want to become that next person. And in this moment, the fishermen are teachable. They are experts, and they're willing to learn from somebody else right now. There's an interesting study that was done about 10 years ago. It was a study on what are the environments, conditions that actually help people grow spiritually. What actually helps you grow spiritually? You're at church today. If you're here, I'm going to assume that you want to grow spiritually in some way. That it's not just a ritualistic act of showing up. That you're here because there's something that goes, even when it's difficult, even if I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, I'm here because I want to keep growing in my faith. The study was super detailed. It took years. And they're researching things like how much does Bible study, or small group, Sunday school type environments, or prayer, or generosity and giving, or serving, all these things that we would say, yes, all of those are beneficial and help you grow. But the interesting thing about the study was that it said none of those actually correlate to your growth. Interesting. Here's what the study showed. The singular thing that determines whether a person grows as an adult is personal responsibility. That's it. Personal responsibility. I want to grow. I'm determined to grow, to change. That's it. That's the motivation that gets you into the environment that allows it to happen. See, because you can show up to a Bible study and not be open to hearing from God at all. You can show up to an environment and not actually be postured in your heart to receive what God might be speaking to you, or what somebody else might be saying that will challenge you. That's the personal responsibility. Do I own what's internal, and am I open to hearing from other input? So you can go through the motions in life, and show up, and have zero transformational effect on you. Or you can show up to the same environments, take responsibility for who you are and how you respond, and you can be on an upward trajectory. Spiritually, professionally, relationally, whatever it may be. Adult learning, adult growth only happens when adults take responsibility. You might be here waiting to be chosen. You've been waiting for somebody to choose you, knowing in your heart that you've been created for more. I have more to offer the world that I'm giving right now. But waiting for somebody to call you into the game. I've been waiting for something meaningful and just waiting to find what that is. See, here is what we see in this story. Your life's mission is revealed on the other side of your first step. You learn what that is when you take the step. When you decide, I am chosen. I'm already chosen, and I'm going to step forward. The fishermen were not expecting to find their life's calling in this moment. That's not why they went back in the waters and threw the nets out. They weren't waiting for something meaning. They weren't looking for meaning or purpose. They were looking for fish. But see, in that moment, when they said yes to the small thing that Jesus asked of them, when they said yes to the small, Jesus revealed the big. At most, they were hoping to catch fish. They entered as fishermen, but they left as fishers of men. Jesus, the chosen one, Jesus, the chosen one, has chosen you, but not just for you. He's chosen you so that you may be moved for a world to find that they too have been chosen. You are not special because you've been chosen. You are called because you've been chosen. You have been chosen not for you, and you have not been chosen just to have eternity with God. You have been chosen for a purpose here, right now. Your chosenness is to step through the doors today, to leave here, and to be the fishers of people. That's it. If you want to see the marker, the measurement of your spiritual maturity, it is measured by the speed in which you say yes to what God's called you to. Spiritual maturity is measured this way, in the space and time from which you hear God speak to you and you say yes. You could have followed Jesus for years and still be slow to say yes. You could have followed Jesus for a day, and when God speaks to you, you say yes immediately. Which one's more mature? So I'm here as your visitor, and don't know if I'll see you again, which gives me a lot of freedom up here, actually. I mean, I would love to see you again. Like I said, so far you're all really kind to me. Here is my challenge today. If you have been chosen by Jesus and you have accepted that in your life, you've opened your life up to Jesus, you've stepped across that line of faith, you have handed over your life to Jesus, and in exchange, he pours new life into you. Where the life that you live is buried is gone, and a new life has been risen, not just for eternity, but now, today. Then the challenge is that you live that way tomorrow and the day after that. That you step through the doors and you actually engage with people here. Monroe is in an interesting moment. I'm an observer, but I see what's happening because I know the people who've moved here recently. They're the people we know in Woodinville and in Kirkland and in Bellevue and in Seattle. They're not the people who knew Monroe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but they are the people who are going to create the future of your community. That is happening right now. And there's two things that can be done right now. One is we ignore it. I'm going to say three things. We can ignore it. Two, we can fight against it. Three, we can fight for those people. And fighting for those people is living your life in a way to engage them in such an intimate, personal way that your life with Jesus becomes so compelling that they know it's something they need too. You have been chosen not just for you. You have been chosen for a world that needs to know that God is real. Jesus did not choose the fishermen to just have a crew, to have a team, to have friends. He chose them not to be fishermen, but to be fishers of men. And if you're here and you know Jesus, you too have that calling. That is not a unique to one person calling. That is a universal, I follow Jesus calling. Every person. And here's going to be the challenge. There's going to be things coming you don't like. There will be culture shifts that make you uncomfortable, and they may have already come. I bought a house in Woodinville. We bought a house in Woodinville together. Her name's on it as well. We bought a house in Woodinville that used to have a barn across the property. Now there are 3 homes. Right? You know what I'm talking about. There are people in my neighborhood who fought against the 3 homes being built. Those are 3 more people who I have a responsibility to share Jesus with. See, the posture of how we move forward is going to determine our effectiveness. Are we chosen for us alone, or us in this church? Or are we chosen for our entire town? Are we the chosen ones for people? Am I befriending the people who think about the world differently than me? Who might not agree with me on things? Who politically might be on the other side? Who socially might actually want things that I think are destructive? But am I fighting against them, or am I fighting for them? See, that's the challenge here. The fishermen were not part of the crowd. But when Jesus chose them, he sent them into the crowd, into those very people that they saw themselves as being different than. And it's a beautiful privilege that we get to join in that. See, Jesus is already active. He's already pursuing people. And long ago, he died for all of humanity. Now we just join him in what he's doing. We don't have to bring Jesus to Monroe. We have to translate what Jesus is already doing here. He's already active. We worship a God who is active and moving and living all around us. What we have to do is be the people who have the openness to see what God is already doing and join him there. We have to be the people who open up our lives to have space for new friendship, for new people, for the new neighbor who's moving in next door, for the future of what's coming, because it's coming whether we're ready or not. It's an honor to be able to do that. It's a great gift and privilege that the creator of everything has chosen humanity to reach humanity. Of all the ways he could reveal himself, he wants to use his people, his church, to be the translators of all of that. So you have been chosen. You might be here today not knowing if you've yet been chosen. Jesus has been an idea. God has been something you've been longing to figure out. And I'm here today to tell you that you've already been chosen. And his invitation is to receive that gift. By opening up your life to the God who created you. To hand over the life that you've lived thus far, whatever pain you have, whatever brokenness you have, to give that to him. And in exchange, what he says is, I'm going to pour my life into you and give you a new life. And that life is one with purpose. And that purpose is to bring that gift to everybody. And if you're here today and that's you, I'm going to lead you in this time of prayer. It's not a magical prayer. The fishermen didn't say anything magical. They just said yes when Jesus spoke to them. Let's pray. If you're here today and you've been longing to be chosen in life, chosen by God. It's just a simple process. You just say yes. You've already been chosen. You simply say yes. And what the scriptures say is, whatever you have, the sin in your life, the brokenness you carry, the hurts that you have, you hand those over to Jesus. And he fills you with a new life, one that's filled with love and faith and hope for tomorrow. If that's you today, you can step into that relationship with Jesus. You can live as the one who's already been chosen by just praying this simple prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. I give you all of it. I give you everything. I hand it to you. You've already chosen me. If you're here today and that's you, you can say yes just as the fishermen did. They said yes to something small, and something huge was revealed. If that was you, if you prayed this today for the first time, you can just respond right now. Just raise your hand. There's something significant about responding and saying yes. There's power in the yes. I see hands in the room, and God sees you. If you're here today and you go, I know I've been chosen, but I have not been living as a chosen one, I'm going to have a moment for you as well. Because we all can be finding ourselves in those moments at times where we forget what God's already done in our life. And we need to say yes once again. Yes to living as a chosen one. If you're here, you've already said yes before, but you need to get back in the game. You too can just respond right now. Just raise your hand up high. Just say, that's me. I know I'm chosen. I know I've been called to more in my life. God, I give my life to you again. It never left you, but I'm going to live with the truth that I'm yours. You've chosen me. God, I thank you so much for this morning. I thank you, God, that you, as creator of everything, stepped into human history, lived a perfect life for us, died for us, defeated death, rose again, that you choose us, that you do not come to shame us, to punish us, but to choose us. I pray that every person here lives as a chosen one. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.